Hi, my name is Kara Kasdorf, and I'm a registered dietitian that practices in the area of sport nutrition. And my practice is run out of Grand River Sports Medicine. And I'm doing these presentations for you today as part of a project in association with the Coaches Association of Ontario and also Quest for Gold. So my hope is that you'll be able to use these videos as a learning opportunity for yourselves as coaches, and possibly also to show these videos to your players and athletes if you think that that might be helpful for them. So I'll be doing a series of about 3 videos. The first one today will be focusing more on kind of everyday nutrition. We'll talk a little bit about pre and post exercise nutrition as well. The next video will focus more on tournament nutrition and what to eat and how to fuel your body when you have multiple events within one day or within a couple of days. And the third video will focus on hydration. So I will have my slides up as I go through and talk about the points throughout the presentations, but you should also have a copy of the slides as well. I did try to include quite a bit of information on the slides so that you can use that as a resource for yourselves as well. So we'll get started. So the outline for today's presentation is that we'll be talking about some of the main nutrients involved in eating for energy and eating for sport, and also discuss some practical meal and snack ideas. We'll be talking about some healthy ideas for meals and snacks before practices and games, and then also talking a little bit about recovery afterwards. So just a couple of key things to point out about why nutrition is such an important tool for training and for athletic performance. So we know that a good diet and proper nutrition definitely results in better performance in sport. It also helps reduce injury, it helps with immune function and reduce the amount of illness, helps for better training, and helps athletes have more energy so that they can train and perform to their maximum ability. We also know, especially for children and adolescents as they're growing and developing, nutrition plays a really important and integral role in terms of their muscle growth and development. So an activity that you could do with your players is to ask them to either write down what they eat and drink throughout the course of the day, just to kind of increase their awareness of some of their nutrition and hydration practices. Sometimes I also ask athletes to write down what they ate and drank before their last practice, if they can remember, what they ate or drank during their last game or practice or tournament, and what they ate or drank after their last game or practice. And sometimes athletes, especially as they're just kind of developing in the sport, they don't pay a lot of attention to their nutrition and hydration practices. So it's again just starting with that awareness of what they're doing and then education about how they can improve upon that. So this slide kind of shows some of the building blocks to optimize nutrition. And I show this just because I really want to focus on more of the foundation diet and the everyday training diet. Sometimes athletes get really focused on supplements and protein powders and wondering about if they should be supplementing with different things. And really they're going to get the most impact if they make changes to their everyday training diet. And so the basic building block is what they're doing every day, their daily diet. And then we move up to looking at pre and post exercise nutrition, because we know that has a big impact on how they feel and how they perform as well. We look at game day or event day nutrition, we look at hydration practices, and then really kind of the last piece that we might look at is supplementation. But we know that really is something that we should only look at once all of these other things have been maximized and optimized as much as possible. So when we look at eating throughout the day, we want to look at our metabolism as a campfire that we want to continue to kind of fuel throughout the day. So we want to keep eating often throughout the day to keep that metabolism going. And often what I talk about with athletes is choosing more of those slow burning types of foods. So things that provide that carbohydrate for energy, but more of a longer lasting type of energy. So things like whole grains, fresh fruit and vegetables, low fat dairy products, lean meats, all of those things provide good protein sources and good carbohydrate sources that can keep them well fueled throughout the day. And we want to choose those healthy choices rather than the fast burning foods. So those would be things like, white bread, more refined types of grains, sugary and very processed cereals, and granola bars and cookies and candies and all of those sorts of things. So really trying to stay away from those options and choosing the healthier things on a daily basis. So energy availability is another topic that sometimes can come up when talking to athletes. And the definition is the amount of energy required, so the amount of calories. When we're talking about energy, we're talking about calories required for basal metabolic requirements and additional activity in order to maintain optimal energy balance and optimal health. So oftentimes for athletes, this can be a little bit of an issue because they're expending a lot of calories in their training and in their games, and especially if they're still going through periods of growth and development, their calorie needs are increased as well. So oftentimes they're not quite eating enough to meet that energy availability, and that can result in fatigue, increased injury, decreased performance, and all of those sorts of things. So it's really important to ensure that your athletes are eating enough in general. So as I've mentioned, it's important for performance and for overall health. And just a point about the inadequate energy intake can lead to a loss of strength, loss of muscle mass, compromised immune function, and actually a lowered resting metabolic rate. So it can really interfere with normal metabolism. So just some tips to ensure that your athletes are eating enough. So definitely encouraging eating breakfast every morning, ideally within 30 to 60 minutes of waking up is what's recommended. And then eating small and healthy meals and snacks throughout the day. So generally what we recommend is eating something every 2 to 4 hours, but it will vary depending on different metabolisms and different periods of growth and different training periods and that sort of thing. Really trying to kind of front load calories so that they're eating more at the beginning of the day, and not and avoiding eating large amounts right at the end of the day, because that oftentimes can happen if they're not eating enough throughout the day. So we really want to make sure that they're eating more at the beginning of the day and then kind of maintaining that throughout the day. Focusing on those pre and post workout meals and snacks will be really important, and we'll talk more about that. And then focusing on nutrient-dense foods. So we want to choose foods that have a lot of nutrients per calorie. So that would be things like fruits and vegetables, low-fat dairy like yogurt, milk, cottage cheese, good sources of protein like chicken and fish and nuts and seeds and all of those sorts of things that provide lots of different vitamins and minerals. So things like calcium and the B vitamins and magnesium and all of those different nutrients that are really important for energy metabolism and for muscle growth and recovery and that sort of thing as well. So I'll talk a little bit about healthy weight gain as well, because sometimes that is a goal of athletes, and it's important to do that at appropriate times and also in a very planned way. So sometimes athletes want to gain extra muscle mass, they want to gain some extra weight, but they don't really have a plan for how to go about doing that. So it is important to do it at an appropriate time in terms of their training, but also to do it in a planned way. So definitely making sure that they're consuming adequate calories and carbohydrates. So they'll need to be consuming enough to meet their needs, to meet the needs of their training, but then also to have an excess so that they're actually seeing a gain. The training plan is really, really important. So making sure that they have the strength training plan to help aid in good quality weight gain. Making sure that they're consuming moderate amounts of protein spread out throughout the day. So a lot of times athletes get really focused on protein if they're trying to gain muscle mass, and it's really not the quantity that's usually an issue, because oftentimes athletes are actually getting enough protein, but it's more the timing of the protein and how often they're getting it throughout the day. So generally what's recommended is about 20 to 25 grams of protein spread out at every meal and snack throughout the day, so every few hours. So that would be, about 3 ounces of meat would be about 20 grams or 25 grams of protein. It would be about a cup of something like cottage cheese or some Greek yogurt. It would be a couple of cups of a low-fat milk. So all of those things would provide that amount of protein. So it doesn't have to be a mega dose of protein, but just moderate amounts that are spread out throughout the day. Really focusing on those pre and post-workout meals and snacks to optimize the effect of the workout. And then after workouts, making sure that they're getting a good recovery meal or snack that has a source of high quality protein. Branched chain amino acids are something that can also be beneficial in terms of muscle recovery. And also a protein that has a faster rate of digestion. So something like a whey protein tends to really hit all of these points. So that can be a really good way to ensure that they're getting the right type of protein. And then really increasing the frequency of eating throughout the day. So if they typically eat every 3 to 4 hours, maybe increasing it to every 2 to 3 hours, and ensuring that they do have a bedtime snack, because that can help with weight gain as well. So in terms of some good sources of carbohydrates are really our main fuel or energy source for our activity. They provide energy to our working muscles during activity, and they do actually help to stimulate the uptake of protein after activity. So very important for recovery. Oftentimes we're very focused on just the protein piece for recovery, but carbohydrates do play a really important role in stimulating that insulin secretion from the pancreas, and that can help the muscles better utilize the protein. So really important that the majority of the diet is made up of carbohydrate-rich foods, and I've listed some here. So things like fruits, fresh fruit or dried fruit, 100% fruit juice, grains like bread, bagels, pasta, rice, all of those sorts of things, starchy foods like potatoes and sweet potato and squash, and some of the vegetables like carrots and peas and those sorts of things. And then milk products like yogurt and milk also contain carbohydrates. So it's easy to get enough carbohydrate, but you want to make sure that your athletes are getting the right sources of carbohydrates, and again, really focusing on nutrient-dense forms of carbohydrates. The grow food is the protein, so really looking at getting protein with each meal and snack as well, because protein does help keep us full and satiated in between meals and snacks. And I think we're all aware of the role of protein in helping to repair muscle tissue after exercise. And it does also provide some energy during activity, even though carbohydrate will be our primary source of fuel during activity. So some protein-rich foods would be things like any kind of meat, like chicken, turkey, beef, pork, fish, nuts and seeds, and their butters, so things like peanut butter and almond butter will provide some protein as well. Eggs provide protein, dairy products like milk, yogurt, and cheese, and then some of the meat alternatives, so things like beans and lentils, tofu and other soy products as well will provide some protein. So really important again to try to get those moderate amounts of protein spread out throughout the day with each meal. So really focusing on nutrient-dense foods is important, and that should really make up the majority of the diet. So foods that are going to provide a lot of nutrition, and then foods that are less nutrient-dense should make up about 10 to 20% of the diet. So still allowing for some of those foods, but really the focus is on more of the nutrient-dense foods. So here's just a little checklist for ensuring that you have a healthy breakfast. So making sure that your breakfast includes at least 3 of the 4 food groups. making sure that there's a good source of protein at breakfast, and this is often a missing piece for a lot of people. They might have a bowl of cereal, they might have some toast or a bagel, and that's not really providing adequate amounts of protein. So aiming for at least 15 to 20 grams of protein at breakfast is what's recommended. So again, some examples of that might be having half a cup or a full cup of the Greek yogurt, and that provides about 15 to 18 grams of protein. Or something like cottage cheese, half a cup of cottage cheese has about 15 grams of protein, so that can be a really good thing to add to a breakfast. One egg has about 6 grams of protein, so a couple of eggs at breakfast could add a good amount of protein. Having 1 or 2 cups of milk at breakfast would provide about 8 to 16 grams of protein. So all of those things are really good things to add, and that's why you do want to make sure that you're having at least 3 food groups to ensure that you're getting that amount of protein. You also want to make sure that you're including a good source of some of those slow burning carbohydrates. So that might be including some whole grains or some oatmeal or steel cut oats or something like that. Making sure that there's a fruit or a vegetable or both at breakfast. And then making sure that breakfast also includes 2 cups of fluids. And when we talk about hydration, we'll talk about the importance of having that base hydration level. And so starting at breakfast is really important with having at least a couple of cups of fluids. So I've just included some examples of breakfast options, and you can read through those yourself, but just some ideas of how to make sure that you're getting enough protein, getting the 3 food groups, getting fruits and vegetables, including all of those things in your breakfasts. In terms of snacking, it's really important to have a carbohydrate source and a protein source at all snacks. So you want to start with a good source of carbohydrate. So that would be either a vegetable or fruit or a whole grain or grain product. And then make sure there's also a source of protein. So again, that would be any meat and alternatives, so things like a hard-boiled egg or some roasted chickpeas or something along those lines, or some nuts. Or a milk and alternative, so something like yogurt or cottage cheese or a glass of milk, something along those lines. So when you're choosing snacks as part of your kind of daily diet, you want to make sure that your carbohydrate choices are lower in sugar and higher in fiber. So we don't want those really kind of quick bursts of energy, we want more of the sustained, longer lasting energy. So when you're choosing things like cereals or granola bars or any of those sorts of things, you really, when you're looking at the label, want to look for bars that have less than 8 grams of sugar per serving and more than 4 grams of fiber per serving. So those are kind of the recommended amounts for things like cereal, granola bars, any of those sorts of things. So here are some examples of snacks. So you can read through the list, but things like some fruit and cheese or some vegetables with hummus, a fruit and yogurt shake, some Greek yogurt and berries, a piece of fruit and some almonds. So different options there that you can look at, but it is important to have the protein and the carbohydrate source at each snack. So in terms of limiting foods, you don't really want to be restrictive about your eating, but as I mentioned before, you do just want to be careful to limit some of the foods that are not as nutrient dense. So things, foods that have a high sugar content or high salt or high fat content, especially, the less healthy forms of fat, often offer lots of calories but not a lot of nutrition. So it may result in taking the place of some other nutrient-dense foods in the diet, and may make you feel sluggish, not perform as well as you could, may result in nutrient deficiencies. So there are some risks associated with having a diet that's higher in some of these calorie-dense foods that are not quite as nutrient-dense. So obviously, I think we're all aware of what some of these foods are, but things like sweets, chips, fast food, pop, some of those sorts of things are things that we want to limit. So typically, we want about 80% of our diet being more of the nutrient-dense foods, and then allowing some room for some of these other foods, but only about 20% of our diet would be made up of these other foods. So oftentimes athletes do feel quite tired, and fatigue is something that athletes can really struggle with. And so it's important to look at dietary reasons why that may be happening. So some common nutrition-related reasons for fatigue could be things like a low carbohydrate intake. So if they don't have enough carbohydrate to fuel their activity, that could be a reason for fatigue. Low iron intake and iron deficiency. So athletes are at risk of having, they're at higher risk of having an iron deficiency or insufficient iron. So that could be something to test, do the blood test to rule out that that's an issue. If they're skipping meals or snacks or not having enough to eat before a practice or a game, that could result in feeling really fatigued. If they're dehydrated, or if they have low levels of hydration because they're not drinking enough, then that could definitely be a reason for fatigue as well. And then poor quality food choices. So again, if overall they're not consuming high quality choices, then that could result in not feeling well and feeling really tired. So I'll be talking a little bit about fueling for recovery. And so recovery nutrition is really important, especially if you have athletes that are training every day or if they're training twice a day. It's really important to make sure that they're really optimizing the recovery period after their workouts or their games. A lot of athletes feel like they need specialized products for recovery nutrition, and that's really not the case. When we're looking at recovery snacks, focusing on real food is going to be the most important thing, because along with the protein and the carbohydrates from that food, they'll also be getting a lot of other nutrients. So things like antioxidants, calcium, magnesium, different things that can definitely help with recovery as well. So here are some examples of things. So chocolate milk or regular white milk would be a good option because it does have some carbohydrate and some protein as well. And typically when we're looking at protein and carbs, we want about a 3-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to protein. So we're looking at, generally about 45 grams of carbohydrate and about 15 grams of protein in a recovery snack or meal. So the focus is actually more on the carbohydrate. They need more carbohydrate in the recovery snack than protein. So oftentimes people are focusing on more of the protein, but it's actually the other way around. So something like a sandwich with some lean protein in it, or a sub would be a good option. Some yogurt, especially if it's Greek yogurt and fruit. Making a smoothie with some yogurt and frozen berries. Making a homemade trail mix with maybe a plain cereal and some nuts and dried fruit. Some of the sports or energy bars can be a good quick recovery snack, especially if you need something quick to grab. And then something like fruit and cottage cheese would be another good option as well. I'm just going to talk a little bit about immune function because oftentimes when athletes are in heavy training periods, they do get sick more often because their immune function is compromised. Because we do know that markers of immune function and inflammation in the body are elevated after intense training sessions. So if athletes are not properly recovering after those sessions, then that can lead to increased illness. So we do know that the post-exercise meal or snack is really important for strengthening the immune system. So protein-rich foods are important. So again, really focusing on foods that have that whey protein in them. And whey protein is actually a milk protein. So things like yogurt and milk would contain whey protein. So you don't necessarily have to go out and get a whey protein powder, but just consuming some of those foods like Greek yogurt or a glass of milk will actually give athletes that whey protein. Antioxidants can be very beneficial as well. So things like vitamin C, vitamin E, different flavonoids, beta carotene. So all of those antioxidants have been shown to help with some of that stress on the body after exercise. So lots of different brightly colored fruits and vegetables will contain those antioxidants. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble vitamin that can be found in a lot of the healthy fats like avocados and avocado oil, different nuts and seeds. So trying to incorporate some of those things in a post-exercise meal or snack would be beneficial as well. Omega-3 fats have been shown to act as an anti-inflammatory in the body, so that can also be beneficial. And the best source of omega-3s is going to be in fish, so especially the fattier fish like salmon, rainbow trout, mackerel, those sorts of fish are quite high in omega-3s. But some of the plant-based sources of omega-3s are things like walnuts and chia seeds and ground flaxseed. So if athletes want to eat fish after a workout, that would be great because it's a good source of protein and omega-3s. But if they're more willing to put something like chia seed in a smoothie, or put some walnuts on some oatmeal or something along those lines, then that would be a good way to get some omega-3s in as well. And then probiotics have also been shown to help with immune function. And again, that can be done through taking a probiotic supplement, or you can get probiotics by eating certain foods. So things like different yogurts that have live bacterial cultures in them will provide probiotics. Kefir is a type of fermented milk product that has 10 different strains of bacterial cultures, so that is a really good source of different probiotics. And other fermented foods as well will provide a source of probiotics, so that can be something really beneficial to include in a post-exercise snack or meal. So this is just a list to talk about some of the different fruits and vegetables and what antioxidants they contain. So oftentimes I'll show this to athletes and just kind of, recommend that they choose one or two of these in their post-exercise snack or meal, and that for sure they're getting at least one from each category every day. Because oftentimes in most people's diets, not just athletes, vegetables and fruits are really low, and so it's important to try to get as much variety to make sure they're getting adequate amounts of a lot of these nutrients, because a lot of Canadians in general are low or deficient in some of these nutrients. So here are just two examples of a portable recovery snack. So there's a chocolate recovery shake, and it's basically just skim milk powder. So still getting that whey protein powder, but it's just through regular skim milk powder, and using a chocolate milk powder, and then just mixing that with water. And that will provide 50 grams of carbs, 18 grams of protein, so that ratio of carbs to protein is right on. And that's something easy that you can take with you, throw it in a gym bag, and it's really easy to have after a workout. And then there's also a recipe here for a recovery trail mix. So just some Cheerios, sunflower seeds, roasted soybeans, raisins, just mix it together. And again, it's something that's really portable that athletes can carry with them and have it after a practice or have it after a game on the drive home. So really important to make it ahead of time and then have it with you so that you can have that after your practice or game. And here are just some other examples of recovery snacks that also meet the amounts of carbohydrate and protein that are recommended, but also are good sources of things like the omega-3s, the probiotics, and the antioxidants. And here are just a couple of other examples as well, but since you have the slides, I won't go through them in too much detail because you can review those yourselves. Just in terms of the protein, I just wanted to point out, sometimes athletes again feel like they have to take a special branched chain amino acid supplement in addition to their recovery snack or meal. But a lot of foods actually do have a good amount of branched chain amino acids already in them. So what's recommended to kind of trigger that muscle synthesis after activity is about 2 grams of leucine, which is one of the branched chain amino acids. And so you can see here the amount of different foods required to obtain that 2 grams of leucine. So something like skim milk, you'd have to have 600 mils. So that is just over 2 cups. So not an unreasonable amount to get that amount of that protein. Soy beverage, you'd have to have about 3.5 cups. Cottage cheese, about 140 grams. 3 eggs. Or if you were taking something like a whey protein isolate, typically it's 1 scoop or 1 serving of that. Or a couple of cups of a yogurt. So definitely obtainable through food sources, but it is also easy to get it through a whey protein powder if that's what the athlete wishes to do. So here are just some additional websites that you can check out that have really good resources, lots of different tips and tools. I've also included my contact information, so if you have any questions or you just need some clarification about anything, please don't hesitate to send me a quick email or call our clinic and we can set up an appointment, or I can just give you a call back and definitely address any concerns that you might have. So thanks for joining me.